Welcome to our epic ocean, where critical solutions to a planet in peril are brought to the surface. Our epic ocean celebrates all that is epic about the ocean and why it is the planet's most vital resource. And now to our host, Rich Gurman.
Captain Paul Watson is the CEO and founder of Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, the leading global marine interventionist organization working to stop illegal activities on the high seas. Prior to Sea Shepherd, he was the co-founder of Greenpeace. Often a controversial figure, he is mostly seen as a hero to those involved in the ocean conservation and preservation world. Captain, welcome to the show, and thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. It is a true honor to have you. How are you?
Oh, pretty good. Thank you.
Thanks for being here, man. So I'd like to start with an important news story, which is both disturbing and critical to the work that you do, which is saving marine species from overfishing, illegal capture, and potential extinction. In July 2019, ABC Nightline aired an investigative story about the totoaba fish and Vaquita porpoise crisis in the Sea of Cortez off the coast of Mexico, where the vaquita, the rarest and smallest cetacean in the world, had fallen victim to the collateral damage of excessive poaching through gill netting for the totoaba. Their highly coveted swim bladder is an extremely valuable delicacy for the Chinese, fetching upwards of $100,000 each, and is dubbed the cocaine of the sea. A Mexican and Chinese cartel has formed over the past several years, and the poaching and illegal activities has driven the vaquita to the brink of extinction. It is estimated there may only be 10 vaquita left in the world. A heartbreaking moment in the story is when Andrea Costa, who heads Earthleague International, references the film Sea of Shadows, which features Sea Shepherd's role in trying to save the world's rarest marine animal. He says, "I dreamt of the last vaquita on Earth calling out to others, to family members, but only silence. And that haunted me." It seems to me like the vaquita story is the lesson of our times, as it encompasses so many things that impact the ocean, the animals, and humans. How should this be affecting all of us, and what can be done at this point?
I think one of the most shameful things that humanity is responsible for is driving entire species into extinction. And not only do we drive them into extinction, but we forget that they were ever there. There are so many species that we've lost that we've just forgotten about completely. You know, the Atlantic gray whale, the sea mink, the Carolina parakeet, the Labrador duck, on and on and on. And the vaquita may well go that way. We've dedicated a lot of resources over the last 7 years to the protection of the vaquita, because, I feel that this is a real responsibility for us, that we have to prevent the extinction of this amazing creature, as well as other species. The vaquita is the most endangered, smallest porpoise on the planet. And it's also representative of the ecosystem within which it lives. So protecting a species is also protecting that ecosystem. And the Sea of Cortez, which is a very diverse and rich ecosystem, is under serious threat from illegal fishing, overfishing, and poaching.
Yeah, it's super sad. What's your, if you had to guess, where do you think this is going to go? And am I correct on that number, that only around 10 are left?
I believe it's between 10 and 21. We don't really know for sure, but we keep doing surveys on that. And there was a Vaquita Capt born last year. That was very optimistic on that. But we can't really focus on the ifs or what will happen. We have to focus on the present, doing everything that we can right now to ensure the survival of the species. And it's not just the survival of the vaquita, it's also the survival of the totoaba fish, which has a price tag on its head because their swim bladders are selling for $20,000 a kilo. And that's a lot of motivation for criminal activity.
Sure is. I recently interviewed Cyril Gooch, who I know is a friend of yours, of Parlay for the Ocean. And he opened the interview telling the story of his meeting Pamela Anderson back in 2012. And she had just brought money to Germany to bail you out of jail. And that night he had a dream that you were executed. And the next morning he flew to Frankfurt to meet you. He was curious if you were this edgy villain that the media had portrayed you to be. And he quickly realized that you were doing the work that we all should be doing. You were in the trenches fighting to save the ocean, the planet and also to save our own species. And when he asked you why you were doing this work, essentially fighting an impossible war, he said you quoted Winston Churchill and said, "The lost causes are the only ones worth fighting for." Why is this cause that you have dedicated your life to so critical?
I believe that the solution to an impossible situation is to find the impossible answer. And that is possible. In 1972, the very idea that Nelson Mandela would become president of South Africa was unthinkable. It was impossible, and yet it became possible. And I think that impossible solutions can be found or realized through passion, courage, and imagination, and the power of individual initiative, individual action. And so I'm very hopeful that we can get results that way. I'm hopeful we can save the Vaquita. And I'm hopeful we can stop the diminishment of diversity and interdependence in the ocean.
Why do you feel like the work that you're doing is not like front page news every day? Like if saving the Vaquita, if saving whales and dolphins and animals isn't enough, isn't saving ourselves enough?
Well, unfortunately, mainstream media is in the control of the corporations that are actually profiting from a lot of this destruction. So, let me see. About 1,200 environmentalists have been murdered over the last 15 years. 1,200. You don't hear about it. Nobody talks about it. It's not on the front page of any newspaper. So this really indicates, the problem with the media is not this thing called fake news. The problem with the media is no news. Mm-hmm. Media decides on what is important and what isn't, and usually that's because of the corporate dictates that regulate that.
1,200 activists killed.
And most of them, unfortunately, were indigenous peoples in Brazil, Colombia, Costa Rica, places like that, where nobody really pays attention to that. You hear about it when somebody notable or famous, like Diane Fossey, is murdered, or we managed to get a lot of publicity towards in Costa Rica when Jairo Mora Sandoval was murdered for protecting turtles. But it is difficult. The thing with the media, and the reason that we've been working successfully with the media over the last 40 years, is we have to understand how the media works. And the media only understands 4 elements: sex, scandal, violence, and celebrity. So we have to work that into the story to get our message across. If you say, well, they're killing whales down in the Southern Ocean, and this is how many of the whales are killing every year, that's not a story. Well, we go down there, we have confrontations with the Japanese whalers. It's dramatic. It's got all those elements, and we get our message across that way.
So the scandal aspect. So you're considered a pirate, a rebel, a vigilante, an eco-terrorist. Like Cyril said, you're sometimes painted as the villain. Yet the United Nations World Charter for Nature states that you are empowered to uphold international conservational law. It seems like a fine line, but as long as you don't cross it, right?
Well, yeah, about 12 years ago, I was invited to give a lecture to the FBI in Quantico. And after the lecture, one of the FBI agents said, Sea Shepherd's walking a pretty fine line when it comes to the law. And I said, yes, but does it really matter how fine that line is as long as you don't cross the line? We don't cross that line. We're upholding international conservation law. We're really an anti-poaching organization. And, when people call me an eco-terrorist, I just respond by saying, no, I've never worked for Monsanto or BP, so I'm not an eco-terrorist. But in the 80s, when people began to call us pirates, that is our opposition, I said, okay, well, I was a student of Aikido, and when something's thrown at you, make it work for you. So I said, if you want us to be pirates, we'll be pirates. And because you know what? Pirates cut through the red tape and got things done. And so we designed our own Jolly Roger, which kids love, and has been a very popular logo for us. So, but we operate within the boundaries of the law and of practicality. And we've never been convicted of a felony crime. We've never been successfully sued.
Nice. And no one's been hurt on your end in the whole process, correct?
No, we've never had in 40 years, we've never had a single injury, which is incredible for ships operating at sea in hostile conditions.
That is pretty amazing. So is global collaboration the key to your success and continued survival, like with the Mexican Navy down in the Sea of Cortez with the support of local government?
Well, back in 1999, we began a partnership with the Galapagos National Park and the government of Ecuador, and that's now evolved. So now we have partnerships with governments in Africa and Latin America. What this means is we provide the resources, we provide the volunteers, the ships, and they give us the authority, the enforcement. And this is working out really well. Just yesterday, we arrested 6 poaching operations in the waters of the Sierra Leone, and over the last year and a half, I think it's 68 or close to 70 poachers that we've seized in African waters. And we're also doing anti-poaching operations in the Mediterranean and in the Eastern Tropical Pacific, in addition to our work in Mexico to protect the Vaquita. In Mexico, we're partnered with the Mexican Navy. We're partnered with countries like Peru and Colombia and many African countries. These partnerships, we've evolved into this working situation with these partnerships, and they do work. For many years, we were on our own. But I think that this really points to how serious the situation is that we are being invited in to help out in the, with these problems.
Absolutely. So with that mentioned, you did have a little incident back in Costa Rica. When and how do these political joining of forces go wrong or get mishandled or misrepresented?
In 2001, we assisted the rangers at Cocos Island National Park to arrest an Ecuadorian longliner. And in fact, it was the first arrest that resulted in the forfeiture of the vessel by the Costa Rican courts. And we were getting a lot of support in Costa Rica, probably too much support, because in 2002, when we were on our way down there, at the request of the Guatemalan government, I had caught a Costa Rican longliner in Guatemalan waters. And we ordered it to stop, and we cut their lines, and we did what the Guatemalan government asked us to do. But when we got to Costa Rica, the fishermen had put in a complaint, and I found myself charged with 8 counts of attempted homicide. But I wasn't really concerned about it because we were making the film Sharkwater, and Rob Stewart was on board. He filmed the whole thing. So we went into court. The court looked at the footage and dismissed the charges. And went back to my vessel. But a week later, a new prosecutor, a new judge, charged me with 8 counts of criminal assault. So once again, we went back into court and showed the film, and again the charges were dismissed. And then I was given clearance to leave Costa Rica. I left Costa Rica, didn't think anything of it. 10 years later, I land in Germany, find myself arrested on a Costa Rican extradition request to the Germans. This time, the thing was called shipwreck endangerment, which made no sense. But 3 years ago, Costa Rica dismissed the charges against me and dropped me from the red notice list, the Interpol red notice list they put on, because of a change of government, which shows you how political it was. If this was judicial, they wouldn't have been able to do that. But with the change of government, the charges were dropped. So, you have to really be very careful because the law can be manipulated politically. And this is a good example of that happening.
Incredible. Wow. So I want to go back in your history a little bit. In 1973, you volunteered to be a medic at the American Indian Movement during the occupation and siege of Wounded Knee, South Dakota. And at one point you said to the leader of the movement, basically, hey man, the odds are against us. We have no chance of winning. What are we doing here? What was his response, and how did that moment shape your future?
Well, we were surrounded by 3,000 federal troops that were shooting into the village, and they had wounded 46 and killed 2. And that's when I went to Russell Means, and I said, we don't have any hope of winning here, or the odds are against us are overwhelming. And what he said to me really has stayed with me all my life. He said, look, we're not concerned about the odds against us. We're not concerned about winning or losing. We're here because it's the right thing to do, the right place to be, and the right time to do it. Don't focus on the future. Focus on the present. What we do in the present will define what the future will be. And that's what we do. We're not worried about the future. We're worried about, and we're focused on what we're doing now to make that future. And the future will be what it will be depending upon our actions today.
That was a great lesson. So you joined the Sierra Club, I believe, back in 1969, the year I was born, by the way. And then were one of the co-founders of Greenpeace, eventually leaving after a conflict regarding the group's philosophical definition of Gandhi's theory of nonviolence. And then that same year, 1977, you formed Sea Shepherd. Can you share that story, please?
Yes, I was a member of the Sierra Club in British Columbia when the United States was testing a nuclear device at Amchick Island in the Aleutians. Now, the Greenpeace was formed from 2 groups, the Sierra Club and the Quakers. I actually was there for a different reason because Amchitka was a wildlife reserve and you couldn't take a gun onto the island, but here you are blowing up a 5 megaton bomb and it had killed quite a number of sea lions and sea otters. And so we had this group called the Don't Make a Wave Committee. And at one of the early meetings, somebody left the meeting, flashed a peace sign and said peace. And Bill Darnell said, "Oh, make it a Greenpeace." And Bob Hunter said, "Wow, that's a great name for the boat." So we named the boat the Greenpeace. And then in '72, we changed the name of the Don't Make a Wave Committee to the Greenpeace Foundation. But it was no accident that Greenpeace was formed by journalists, broadcasters, communications people who understood the media. And that's why it became quite successful. And I left Greenpeace in '77 because I felt that I had to do more. We had to intervene. And I set Sea Shepherd up to intervene. And I developed a strategy which I called aggressive nonviolence. We're not going to hurt anybody, but we're going to be aggressive. And if it means damaging equipment which is being used for illegal purposes, then we're going to do that. To me, that's a nonviolent act. If you walk up to an elephant poacher and pull the rifle out of his hand and throw it in and break it, that is an act of nonviolence. It really depends upon your interpretation of that.
Absolutely. And I think that right there creates the rub of why there's controversy around what you do sometimes. How big is Sea Shepherd today, and what is your current role?
Well, Sea Shepherd has grown slowly, and for a very good reason. We don't invest money into fundraising, direct mail campaigns, things like that. As word of mouth, people come to us. But, for example, Greenpeace, which I was once involved in, their annual budget is about 350 million euros a year. Ours is 12 million. Yet we have 12 ships; they have 3. So it's not the money; it's the passion of the volunteers involved that make us what we are. We get things done because of that. And when Japan came after us to sue us in the U.S. courts, and they wanted to stop me particularly, but also to stop Sea Shepherd, we learned a lesson. And that lesson is you can stop an individual, you can shut down an organization, but you can't stop a movement. So Sea Shepherd has evolved into a global movement. We're in 42 different countries. They're all separate entities. And, I can't even keep track of the campaigns and the ships and the things that we're doing now. And that's the way it should be. That's the way a movement really should be. I think the one thing I'm most proud of is the fact that Sea Shepherd has evolved into this global movement.
And what's your exact role these days?
Founder, I guess. I spend a lot of time doing interviews, writing books, and consulting with the operations of the ships. Alex Cornelissen is the CEO for Sea Shepherd Global now. Captain Peter Hammerson is in charge of African campaigns. All of our campaign leaders are out there. And again, I can't even keep track of the number of captains, officers, and everything like that, but they're all doing a wonderful job.
Nice. So you mentioned those 3 virtues needed to change the world. Again, passion, courage, and imagination. And you also said that if you want to solve an impossible problem, that you need to look for an impossible situation. I created this show based on my personal love for dolphins and whales. I've had almost 2,000 encounters, mostly here in Laguna Beach, California, and also all around the world, swimming and paddleboarding with dolphins and whales. And I really wanted to discover solutions for our planet, which I believe is, I'm sure you would agree, in a state of peril. So can you elaborate on those 3 virtues, and what are the exact solutions that we need right now?
I think that history has demonstrated that passionate people who are courageous and use their imagination can make a difference. Because of Diane Fossey, we still have mountain gorillas in Rwanda. Look what Greta Thunberg has accomplished and how many people she's mobilized on climate change issues. Yeah. And, if a 16-year-old girl can do that, that means all of us have that capability. We can all do things. We just have to understand that we have the power to do it and to not be deterred. Many years ago, I got a call from a man in Scotland, and he said, they're killing the gray seals up here in the Orkney Islands. What are you going to do about it? I said, well, I don't know. I'm on the other side of the planet. You're in Scotland. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, what are you going to do about it?
He said, well, what can I do about it? So we helped him set up Sea Shepherd in Scotland, and he and a bunch of Scottish volunteers went up to the Orkney Islands, walked up to the sealers, very enthusiastic. They literally pulled the rifles out of their hands, threw them into the ocean. And of course, they all got arrested, and it was a big trial, and we all won. But the great thing about it, we received so much publicity for that we raised the money to buy the island, which is now a seal sanctuary. So, and all because one guy said, well, what can I do? We can all do that. One of my crew members, 18-year-old guy from Florida, he was on the Sierra campaign in 1979. And after the campaign, he said, we got to do something about the way they're treating chimpanzees in laboratories. And I said, well, this is Sea Shepherd. we can't, this is not up our alley, really. And I said, well, why don't you do something about it? He said, well, what can I do? I said, well, use your imagination. Yeah, I'm sure you can come up with a plan. Anyway, he went back to Maryland, got a job in a laboratory, documented everything that was happening in there, turned it over to the Washington Post and to the TV, and closed the place down. But that was the foundation for him establishing People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, PETA. Wow. So this is one of the things we try to do with Sea Shepherd, is to make people understand when they're involved with us, just follow your passion, go out and do it. One of our former captains, she's up there right now off the coast of North Africa in her own ship that she got the artist Banksy to buy for her. And she's rescuing refugees. That's what she wants to do. And she's doing it. And people say, oh, you can't do that, but she's doing it. So never let people say you can't do it. You can do it.
Oh, I've never heard the Banksy story. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that one. So I think it's fair to say that you definitely embody the courage that you say is needed. What, if anything, frightens you the most, and why?
Well, I think the thing that frightens me the most is not doing anything. The idea that humanity is driving ourselves into extinction. If we destroy the ocean, if we diminish life in the ocean, we die. We don't live on this planet with a dead ocean. So really, what this is involved is we're not fighting to save the planet. The planet's going to do just fine. It'll be here millions of years from now, and there will be life on it. But this is about saving ourselves from ourselves. And that's really what it's all about. And of course, with a lot of species that we'll take down with us. But, if I learned anything from the natural history, is that we've had 5 major extinction events in the history of the planet, and we're now in the Anthropocene, or the 6th major extinction. But all 5 of those extinction events had one thing in common: 18 to 20 million years for a full recovery. So no matter what we do, 18 to 20 million years from now, it's going to be a very nice planet again. But our obligation is to do everything we can to save what is here now. And our biggest enemy, human greed, primarily, and people who are willing to tear down the sun if they can make $1 off of it. And that's who we're really fighting. And trying to get across this understanding that we have to learn to live in harmony with all other species. We have to have a biocentric point of view instead of this current anthropocentric paradigm that we live in. The understanding that we need these species. They don't need us, but we need them. And, a few years ago, I had Brett Hume from, I think it was the Fox Network, called me up, and he says, I heard that you said that bees, trees, and fish and worms are more important than people. Did you say that? I said, yeah, I think I did. He said, how could you say something so outrageous? That's the most unchristian thing I've ever heard of. How could you say that? And I said, well, I said it for a very simple reason. It's ecologically, they're more important than we are. They can live here without us, but we cannot live here without them. We need them. And if we don't recognize that, we're not going to survive. Yeah,
that's so true. Can you explain how the loss of phytoplankton would basically be the end of humans?
Well, since 1950, we've seen a 40% diminishment in phytoplankton populations, and you can back that up. Scientific America has had articles on this. 40% diminishment in phytoplankton populations. Now, phytoplankton provides up to 70% of the oxygen in the air that we breathe. So removing phytoplankton from the seas would be catastrophic. We simply cannot live on this planet without phytoplankton. We need it. And phytoplankton populations are being diminished because of the diminishment of the nutrient base that is required by the phytoplankton: iron, nitrogen. And this is provided through the feces of whales and dolphins and seabirds and fish. So when you diminish them, one group, you diminish the others. The 3 laws of ecology: the law of diversity, that the strength of an ecosystem is dependent upon diversity within it; the law of interdependence, that all those species within it are interdependent with each other; the law of finite resources, that there's a limit to growth and a limit to carrying capacity. And when we steal the carrying capacity of other species, we diminish both diversity and interdependence, and that leads to our own downfall.
Well said. I want to talk about one of the movies you were featured in recently. It has your name on it. Leslie Chilcott, who produced Waiting for Superman, It Might Get Loud, and also the Academy Award-winning documentary The Inconvenient Truth with Al Gore, put together a film about you in 2019 called simply Watson. I enjoyed it very much, and I feel like I got to know you much more on a personal level, about your personal love for the animals and the planet. And we also get to see you as a land-bound family man, too. It was very humanizing. How did this project come about, and what was your intention for the documentary?
When Leslie Chilcott contacted me about doing the film, I knew that she had done Inconvenient Truth with Al Gore. So I said, yeah, absolutely. I'd be very excited to do the project with you. And I think she did a wonderful job with it. She's a brilliant filmmaker. Yeah. And so we're very, very happy with that project. But I've always understood that the most powerful weapon that's ever been invented is the camera. And that the power of the camera is not only there to expose truth, but it's also there for protection. And so we had Whale Wars, the TV show, but we've had numerous documentaries we've been involved with. The Cove, Sharkwater, Chasing the Thunder, and now Seaspiracy. And I think these are all very important tools for changing awareness. What I really like about Seaspiracy is that it's trending in the top 10 and number 1 some places on Netflix. This is reaching people who are not the converted. This is reaching people who haven't even heard of the problem before. And that to me is a really valuable contribution. If you can reach those people and get them to think and that. Now, I don't expect everybody to agree with me. I just want people to think about it. And this is what we do. I've always said that the role, an effective role of a conservationist is to make waves, to make people think, to shake things up, to rock the boat. And so that's what we do. I don't expect everybody to support us. In fact, I kind of measure our success by how many people we make angry. It means that we're getting somewhere.
Some would say you're succeeding based on that then. So we'll come back to Seaspiracy because I think to your point, that's really opened up a lot of eyes to a lot of the issues in the ocean. But I want to stick with Watson for a moment. Like Inconvenient Truth, my question is, do you have any plans to create more outreach, maybe ongoing workshops, to continue your legacy work in education, maybe similar to Climate Reality Workshop that Al Gore launched? Or is your work just going to kind of stay in the trenches?
Well, we're doing our anti-poaching patrols and campaigns all around the world, but we are certainly working on documentaries. For instance, right now we're working on one on salmon farming. But what I've always found is that we don't really actually do the documentaries ourselves. We assist those who are doing them because that gives it a more objective approach. It's not a propaganda piece coming out of Sea Shepherd. We're just there to lend our experience, the use of our vessels, and our film footage or whatever. But, when we did Whale Wars, I think one of the reasons that it was successful is it was a true reality show. And what I mean by that is they didn't tell us, there was no script. They didn't tell us what to do or where to go. And we didn't tell them how to edit it. And I think that partnership worked out quite well.
So speaking of whale wars, obviously eradication of the whale industry has always been one of your main goals. What impact do you feel that show had on whaling?
The Japanese are no longer in the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary. As of 2 years ago, there has been no whaling in international waters anywhere. All whaling today is restricted to the waters of Norway, Denmark, and Japan. And I'm really quite satisfied with the fact that when I began this in 1975 till now, we've eradicated 95% of all industrial whaling operations, 95%. When we got involved, Australia, Chile, South Africa, Spain, all of these countries were whaling nations, and that's no more. So it's been a long haul, but it's been a successful campaign. I said in my lifetime I would love to eradicate this perversion of whaling, and I think we're almost 95% there. So I could possibly see that before the end of my days.
That's an incredible accomplishment. I saw, what was it, last month or maybe the month before, that Norway is set to kill 1,200 plus minke whales this year in 2021. How is that still possible? And are you focused on Norway also?
Well, Norway is the number one whaling nation. Japan is number 2 right now, but the Norwegians are killing primarily for the Japanese market. Mm-hmm. We're not interfering with the Japanese whaling because that's what Japan would want us to do. They want to get that nationalistic fervor up by having the outsiders come in and that. But I've realized something about Japan. Whaling will be dead within 10 years, certainly maybe even 5. It's a dying industry. It's hugely subsidized. It cannot exist on its own. So we're going to let it die. And if it dies, so won't Norwegian whaling as well. But, the problem when you're dealing with countries where the activities are taking place in their national waters, then they have the power of the law and enforcement on their side. So it makes it very, very difficult. When we're dealing with the Japanese in the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary, then the law is on our side. So we have to look at it from that kind of a strategic point of view. But we have to be relentless. We have to be persistent. And I believe that we're going to accomplish that goal.
Beautiful. Regarding whales, I personally believe that whales possess sacred and ancient wisdom. Do you agree? And also, why are whales so important to the ocean and the planet beyond just being sacred, mystical creatures?
Whales are the farmers of the oceans. They do provide nutrients for the phytoplankton, but they're also, I think there's so much we can learn from them. If anybody's taken Biology 101, you see they put a rat brain up there and compare it to a monkey brain. The monkey brain's compared to the human brain, and they'll say, well, look, by the increasing size of the brain and the complexity on the neocortex area, that the chimpanzee's more intelligent than the rat, and we're more intelligent than the chimpanzee. They never put an orca brain up there. They never put a sperm whale brain up there. It makes us look really, really stupid. The human brain's 1,700 cubic centimeters. The orca is 6,000. The sperm whale, the largest brain to have ever evolved on the planet, is a 9,000 cubic centimeter brain, and the convolutions on the neocortex area are far more pronounced. It looks, just looking at it, you see that it's more complex. But again, let's look at what is intelligence. I was debating a whaler in Norway. He said, well, Watson, you say that whales are more intelligent than people. This is a really stupid thing to say. How can you say something so stupid? And I said, George, I measure intelligence by the ability to live in harmony within your ecosystem. And by that criteria, whales are far more intelligent than we are. And he looked at me and said, well, by that criteria, cockroaches are more intelligent than we are. I said, George, you're beginning to understand what I'm trying to tell you. The fact is, as we humans, we measure our intelligence by eye-to-hand coordination, the ability to manipulate tools. Every species has an intelligence relevant to their place within the ecosystem. A dog can walk into the room and tell you who was there yesterday if it could talk, but it knows. I like I said in the film, Watson, I don't know what whales think, but I do know that they think. Mm.
Yes, and I 100% agree. I've had so many encounters with them, and just to stare eye to eye with a whale, well, there's no obviously verbal communication going on. There's definitely a transmission of energy and love it's really hard to put into words.
I don't know of anybody who's ever swam with whales that's not been changed by the experience.
Yeah, the last time I was in the Silver Bank in the Dominican Republic, on the very last day of the trip, I had this encounter where I just stared into the eye of a baby humpback, and that entire rest of the day and evening, I was sitting on the boat, speechless, in tears, and just a moment I could never forget, and I can't bear to live in a world where we would have to explain to a child what a humpback whale was, what a vaquita porpoise is and was. So that's why I love and respect the work that you're doing. And so what's the number one issue that you're focused on right now, and why is that most important?
Mainly we're focusing on illegal, unregulated, and unrestricted fishing operations around the world because we're simply overfishing our oceans. So that's where we're doing a lot of anti-poaching work as a result.
So speaking of fishing, I'm here in Laguna Beach, California, and we have a 6-mile stretch of coastline right here that is not only a marine protected area and MPA, but it's also a no-take zone, meaning you just can't fish. And this went into effect in 2012. And at that point, there was very few fish here. And if you asked a fisherman, hey, why is there no fish? Their answer would be because we caught them all. And now today, almost 9-10 years later, there is an abundance of fish. And we have more species of dolphins and whales than pretty much anywhere on the entire planet. And I remember I would paddle out, no exaggeration, 6 months after this went into effect. And all of a sudden, there was just fish everywhere. So is this just a microcosm of what happens if we just leave the ocean alone and allow it to restore itself?
Yes, in 2015, when I spoke to the COP21 conference, a climate change conference in Paris, that's what I proposed, that if we really want to address climate change, we have to allow the ocean, which is our life support system, to have the time to repair the damage we've done to it. We have to shut down industrialized commercial fishing operations. And, for many, many hundreds of years, the shamans in Polynesian cultures, they had this thing called kapu, where they would declare a bay, like Hanauma Bay in Hawaii, they would declare it kapu, no fishing for 20 years. And anybody caught fishing there, the penalty was a death penalty. And people said, well, that's a little extreme, but not from their point of view, because they understood that if the fish disappeared, the people would die. It was a question of survival. And the problem today is there's no kapu areas anywhere in the world. There's no place for the fish to go.
I believe so. It's kapu in Hawaiian. Is it tambu in Fiji? Is that what they call the same practice?
Taboo, yeah.
Taboo. Is this something that could be regulated? Because to me, I mean, it seems to me the best thing an individual can do would be to stop eating animals altogether and animal byproducts, right? I don't think that's a realistic thing when you figure well over 1 billion people eat fish. So I think
that it is realistic if you look at it from this point of view. It's not realistic for people living in villages in West Africa or in India or in Latin America, Mexico places. It's not realistic, but it is realistic for people living in Europe and Western countries that have the resources to actually have a plant-based diet and everything. We can no longer continue to use third world countries as our excuse for, eating a fish which is brought halfway around the world. We can no longer do that. It's not about starving people. It's about us. And it's about industrialized fishing operations, which are literally stealing the fish from those communities. So the fishing industry would like you to think that we're actually the ones that are opposed to artisanal and indigenous fishing, when in fact, they're the ones who are destroying it.
Interesting. So if you look at long lines and nets and bottom draggers, gill nets, drift nets, ghost nets, these are both visible and oftentimes invisible killers in the ocean. And I think if people saw this activity happening on land, they would take to the streets, right? So what can be done, and does regenerative or sustainable fishing even exist?
Yeah, it's like if you take a 100-mile long net and just dragged it across the Serengeti, and your target is zebras, but you picked up everything else in the process and killed it. That's pretty much what modern fishing is all about. For every kilo of shrimp that's taken from the sea, 22 kilos of something else has had to die. And of course, the bycatch is incredible. Right now, we're involved with a campaign in the Biscay Bay area against the French trawling fleet, which every year kills 10,000 dolphins a year. 10,000 dolphins a year. This is the biggest dolphin kill, single biggest dolphin kill on the planet. And yet people are concerned, well, there's Taiji. They're killing dolphins in Taiji. They're killing dolphins in the Faroe Islands. Yes, they are. And we're opposed to that, too. But let's not forget that France is now the leading killer of dolphins.
So 10 times more, probably more than 10 times more than Taiji, right?
Yeah.
So sustainable fishing, in your mind, doesn't exist.
No.
Is there such thing as a clean, safe, and well-managed fishery? Is this one of the answers to the problem here, or no?
I think if you go out in a canoe or an outrigger off of, Sierra Leone or Liberia, then you got a sustainable fishery. But the economics of this are such that these fishing ships, some of them cost $100 million. That's an incredible amount of money to owe to a bank, which means an incredible amount of fish that have to be caught every year just to pay off the bank loans that you got to secure that vessel in the first place. And so the bigger the investment, the more fish they have to get. And here's the other thing, too, which part of the economics of extinction, is that the more scarce the fish becomes, the more valuable it becomes. So therefore, it's an investment in extinction. Bluefin tuna prices are the highest of any fish on the planet because their numbers have been declined by 90%. And a lot of these fishing corporations, they don't really care about the future. They're not concerned about that. It's short-term investment for short-term gain. We'll just reinvest the money into something else. So, again, they would like you to think that these are hardworking fishing folk out there that are, invested in the future and their children's children. But that is not the case. They don't care. They're corporate entities that really simply don't care. And the solution also isn't aqua farming or aquaculture, which, that to me is a very destructive thing. Salmon, for instance, on salmon farms consume an incredible amount of fish. In fact, I would say anywhere between 20 and 40%, we don't actually know the precise numbers, of all the fish caught in the ocean is fed to animals, to chickens, to pigs, to domestic salmon, to house cats. We live in a world right now where chickens are eating more fish than all the puffins and albatross in the oceans. And domestic house cats eat 2.8 million tons of fish every year, which is more than all the seals in the North Atlantic Ocean.
So back to Seaspiracy, which obviously talks a lot about these issues. It's created a lot of buzz with the masses, like you said, thanks to Netflix. And it's also created a conversation within the world of ocean protection organizations for some inaccuracies, I think, on some statistics in the movie, and also for calling out leadership for some shady practices. What was your take on the film? What do you think the filmmakers got right, and where did they miss the mark?
Well, I think that was an excellent film, but also the most successful films are films that tell stories. Sharkbot with Rob Stewart, Gorillas in the Mist with Diane Fossey. And this is Ellie and Lucy Tabrizi's story. You know, and some of the criticisms, while I didn't have the facts right, the statistics are wrong. They're not writing a dissertation for their PhD for Harvard. What they're doing is trying to tell their story, their experience. And people can take that from what they want. But I don't find that there was a lot of misinformation. You know, you can find scientists on every side of an issue to defend your cause. Just look like climate change is a good example. Scientists who support it, scientists who are against it. You know, so scientists do not have a monopoly on the truth. It can be manipulated. I always say, as I said in the film, follow the money. You know, when they say something, who are they working for? If they're working for the seafood industry, well, then it's understandable what they're saying. But, you know, you got guys like Dr. Boris Worm, who's a professor, whose studies, you know, we have been citing. You know, he's more independent and more objective on that. But for instance, one of the things they said, well, Dr. Boris Worm said that in 2048, the fisheries is going to collapse. That wasn't quite correct. He actually went back and did another paper. And yes, that is true. But what did he say? 88% diminishment, not 100% diminishment. So that's a big difference. I mean, what's the difference whether the fishery collapses in 2048 or 2078? I mean, why are we arguing over a 20-year period of time? It's the end result, which is the problem. Personally, I think it's very optimistic. I think fisheries are collapsing right now and will be in a very serious state by 2030.
So you like the movie, and I can't even tell you how many phone calls and texts I got from friends that were like, "Oh my God, I can't eat fish anymore." And I think if that was the main outcome that the movie creates is less people eating animals, that's probably a good thing. Yeah.
I think it is. That's a good message. That's Allie and Lucy's message is, you said, well, this is a vegan film. Yes, it is, because that's their story. That's what they're talking about. So I don't know why people insist upon saying, well, this should be covered or that should be covered. You know, my response to that? Make your own film.
That's right. Yeah, I heard a lot of people complaining that they didn't spend enough time, I think it was on focusing on indigenous people. I'm like, well, that's not what the movie was about, right? It was, to your point, it was their story.
It's 90 minutes to make a film, to cover such a huge topic on that. I think they did an excellent job. They spent 5 years doing it. And they, you know, a lot of the stuff ended up on the editing room floor because there simply is not enough room on that.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
But I think the film has, you know, Sylvia Earles thinks highly of it, and she's one of the most respected oceanographers on the planet. So I think the film has made its point, and most importantly, it's got people thinking. And the controversy is always good.
It's always good. So I want to look at, Elon Musk, Richard Branson, Jeff Bezos. These guys are spending massive fortunes looking for life on other planets. And you mentioned Sylvia Earle, people like her, James Cameron, Ray Dalio, they're exploring the deepest depths of the ocean. Meanwhile, we are here destroying the only planet that we know of that has air to breathe, rich resources, and the capacity to sustain human life. Should we be doing less exploration and focus on cleaning up this mess that we made? It sure seems like great wealth would be, you know, like you said, follow the money. It sure seems like great wealth would be better served here for education and activism. I feel like this whole movement is really about, like you even said this, saving ourselves from ourselves. Yeah. How do we get people to begin treating this crisis as if our lives truly depend on it?
Well, we spend billions of dollars searching for the universe for extraterrestrial life while ignoring the life that we have right here, because that just illustrates our detachment, our alienation from our own natural world. Elon Musk and others, I mean, they're pursuing their personal agendas. I mean, there's nothing we can really do about that. I'm all for space research, but let's repair the damage here first, you know, because, you know, we are a species that likes to explore, but we also need to repair the damage before we can go forward and do that kind of thing. I mean, what's the point of, you know, people say, well, we can terraform Mars. We can have colonies on Mars. Well, what's the point of that if we destroyed the ecosystems that we have here right now. This is the perfect planet, and let's not ruin it to go search to try and establish a habitat on a desert planet somewhere. It's all well and good to pursue knowledge, but really we have to understand the natural world we live in. I think the real problem is that we suffer from this, what I call collective mass psychosis called Anthropocentrism. This idea that it's all about us. Everything was created about us. Everything that we want to do is good. Every single religion on this planet is centered on we being the all-important center of creation. I think we have to learn from indigenous cultures that we are not that important, that we are equal to all other species. We need all these other species. We have to live in harmony with them. And so I really think that what we need is a shift from that anthropocentrism to a biocentric perspective. I don't know if that's possible, but I think that's what we really need to do.
I agree. It's such an egocentric approach that we have. I've heard you say that we are essentially hurling through space on a blue marble, and the ocean is our life support system. And you call the ocean a planet, not a sea. And we are the ocean. We are not separate from it. How do we get people to understand this connection?
Well, that's what I try to get at. We call it the Earth, but really, what is it? This planet is water in continuous circulation. Sometimes it's in the sea. Sometimes it's in ice. Sometimes it's underground. Sometimes it's in the atmosphere. And, it always is in all those places, but it's also in the cells of every plant and animal. So the water that is in your body right now was once in the sea, once in ice, once underground, once in the clouds. It's constantly circulating. It's this living system. We are the ocean. This whole planet is the ocean. And it's all connected. Everything's interconnected with each other. And water is a permanent element. I mean, the glass of water that you drink was once pissed by a dinosaur 200 million years ago. It's the same water, really. Water is life. And I think that's something that we need to understand. But the Earth is this spaceship. It's this thing on this incredible voyage around the Milky Way galaxy at phenomenal speeds. And every spaceship has a life support system that provides food and air we breathe and regulates climate and temperature. And it's run by a crew of Earthlings, crew of species. And not us. We humans, we're passengers. We're having a wonderful time entertaining ourselves. But what we're doing is we're murdering crew members. We're killing them. And there's only so many crew you can kill before the machinery begins to fall apart and it starts to collapse. And I think that's where we're heading right now, unless we learn to respect the crew and protect them.
Yeah, I recently interviewed also Luis Sohoyas, who made, among other movies, Racing Extinction and, of course, The Cove and Game Changers. And in Racing Extinction, he talks about how 1 million species are in jeopardy. And like I said earlier, I can't imagine, I wouldn't want to live in a world where I had to explain to someone what a humpback whale was and how we killed off one of the most intelligent beings on the planet. So my question is, and we've touched on this a little, how do we begin to live in harmony with the basic laws of nature? Can 7 billion plus people with 7 billion plus realities, can we find a balance? I kind of feel like we're at this crossroads where either we're going to figure it out, we're going to figure out how to live in harmony and balance, or the Earth is going to just spit us off. And like you said, the Earth will be just fine without us. How do we find this balance?
Yeah, we're going to have to learn how to find that solution. I was born into a world of 3 billion people, and now it's almost 8 billion people. And what does that mean for 50 years from now, 100 years from now? Is it going to be 10 billion, 12 billion? But, where does it stop? So instead of having poor people or third world countries striving to be like Western countries should be striving to be like poorer countries. In other words, less is more. We need to learn to live with fewer resources and everything. 100 years from now, my vision for the future is that it'll be one of either two things: this dystopian nightmare, sort of like Mad Max, but without the cars, or it'll be like 1820, sailing boats, windmills, agrarian farms. It's got to go one way or the other, because it can't continue to go this way. There's a limit to growth. There's a limit to fossil fuels. Our entire culture, our entire civilization right now rests on the availability of fossil fuels. A limit is it's a finite resource. Once that collapses, there's nothing that can replace it. Solar energy is not going to provide the kind of energy we need for 8, 10, 12 billion people. And also, you have nuclear industry. They always talk about, it's a low carbon footprint of nuclear industry. Do you know how much to get one ounce of uranium takes 1,000 tons of pitch blende ore that has to be mined, refined, crushed, and transported? It's an incredibly high carbon footprint, but they don't even talk about that. And then, of course, you have the problem of nuclear waste, and Fukushima and Chernobyl should have taught us the lessons on that one. So I think we have to find ways to live in accordance with the basic laws of ecology.
Definitely. You mentioned when you were born, there was only 3 billion people on the planet. I'm curious about your influences when you grow up. How did your parents influence you as a man and also in your work?
Well, actually, none at all, really. When I was 10 years old, I was raised in a fishing village in eastern Canada. And when I was 10 years old, I spent the summer swimming with a family of beavers. And the next summer, when I went back, I found the beavers were gone, and that angered me. And that winter, I began to walk the trap lines and destroy the traps and free the animals. And so I guess I've been doing the same thing for the last 60 years. So I guess my teachers were the beavers and other animals. In fact, when I was 11 years old, I discovered the books of Grey Owl, who was a fur trapper in Canada, who became the greatest protector of beavers in Canada. He had a change of heart, and that told me that people can change, and that we can do wonderful things. And then I followed the careers of people like Jane Goodall and Diane Fossey and Baruta Galdikas and all of these others who have individually have accomplished so much in the area of protecting endangered species and habitats.
Mm. You mentioned Sylvia Earle before. I have very few heroes in life, but I'd call her a hero of mine. So I think she really embodies the empathy that I feel we need in the world. And in her movie Mission Blue, she talks openly about her passion for the ocean, the work that she's done, and how that impacted her personally, perhaps taking away from her ability to be the best wife and mother that she could be. In Watson, you share a similar story. You have a daughter, Lily, from a previous marriage, and now have a son named Tiger with your wife, Yana. By the way, I have an ex-wife named Yana, so we share that commonality. I'm curious, how do you find balance between doing this work that's so important to protect your children's future while also enjoying the present moment with them?
Well, I look on children as teachers, because they're born with the imagination and the intuition to understand what the true nature of things. And so my son Tiger is also my teacher. My daughter Lani was also a teacher. I learned a lesson way back in the 70s. I had the opportunity to speak to a school in the Queen Charlotte Islands on the Haida Indian Reservation. And in the morning, we spoke to the kindergarten kids. And I said, how many of you kids speak the Haida language? They all did. How many of you kids know anything about whales? Didn't have to say anything, just listen to their stories. By the time I got to middle school, only half of them spoke the language, only half of them knew anything about whales. And by the time I got to the seniors, nobody spoke Haida and nobody gave a damn about whales. So we'd taken these beautiful, wonderful children and turned them into morons through our educational system. And that's when I discovered, look, just listen to them. When people say, what do we teach our children? I said, don't teach them anything. Listen to them and encourage them and build on what their dreams, and do that. Mm-hmm. And, when my daughter was 7 years old, I took her aside and I said, Lanny, I'm not your boss. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to help you do what you want to do. It's your life. You're your boss. You do that. And it gave her that kind of confidence, which has certainly served her well in her adult life. At one point where she's working now, she's following the passion, doing what she wanted to do. She actually is a producer of video games, really.
Oh, nice.
And she was a producer of Halo, for instance. Now she's doing a flight simulation program. But when she went in to get that job, I think her husband said, you don't have the experience for this. You're not going to get the job. And she looked at him and says, well, all they can do is say no. And she got the job. So that's the kind of confidence we need to build in our children in that. And this understanding, you can accomplish whatever you're passionate about, whatever you put your mind to. And don't be deterred by criticism. I had, teachers, as a lot of us had teachers in the past who say, oh, you don't have the ability to do this. You're not going to go anywhere. This is a kind of the way they put you down. And I said, well, I'm not going to listen to them. When I was a child, I cut up the map of the world and the teacher got angry and she said, what do you do that for? And I said, well, I just put them all together. I think this was one continent one time. And she said, oh, that's stupid. But I was right. wasn't that I was smarter than her. It just made intuitive sense to me at the time. And she had been conditioned to say, well, that's just stupid, you know? So children have insights which adults no longer have.
So true. And like you said, there appears to be a growing generation of kids who really get it, who are committed to cleaning up the mess that we've handed to them. You always say that to be an effective conservationist, you need to be able to piss some people off. And if you're not, right, you're not doing your job. So beyond what you just shared, which was great, what other advice would you give to anyone that wants to follow in the footsteps of a Paul Watson or a Sylvia Earle?
I just say follow your passion, use your skills and your abilities to the best of the best way you can. And it doesn't matter what your approach is. It can be education, it can be litigation, it can be legislation, it can be direct intervention. Do what you do best, and that's where you can really make a difference. And also never misunderstand the fact that you have the power to make a difference. Every single social revolution in history has been carried out by the passion of individuals. Slavery was ended in the U.S. by people like Wilberforce in England and Douglass in the U.S. The women's suffragette movement, that was the passion of individual women who took to the streets to do that. You know, Woodrow Wilson gets all the credit for the amendment giving women the right to vote, but he was their main opponent for 10 years. He was the one who tried to stifle them, but he gets the credit. It's all those unsung women who actually took to the streets who made the difference. And so when you look at history, it's that kind of passion that has changed almost everything.
Well said. I recently read this quote from Anthony Kiedis, longtime frontman for the Red Hot Chili Peppers rock band, and he said that my hope is that my son grows up to be a sea shepherd, which I thought was a pretty powerful message to get an endorsement from one of the world's most celebrated pop and rock culture icons. Is that a message that we need to hear more often?
It's amazing. In 1985, the Chili Peppers did benefits for Sea Shepherd when nobody knew who they were. That was they were at the Roxy in Hollywood, and we'd go there and pass out our leaflets at their little concerts and everything. And it was in 2007 when we had our 25th anniversary, I believe it was, and I invited Anthony and Flea, and they showed up, and they were wearing the T-shirts that I gave them in 1985. They had kept them.
That's amazing. That's so good. So I feel like this has been a great time for reflection in the last year or so. The planet and the people went into a reset mode on so many levels recently. So last couple questions here. If you could do this all over again, what would you do better or different?
I think if I had to do it all over again, I probably, would make wiser decisions on many cases. And I would probably be more aggressive in some circumstances than I have been. But I think that overall, I've been on the right track. I'm sort of satisfied with the development of Sea Shepherd into a global movement. I've really it's no longer my responsibility. It's out there. It's out there, and I'm happy to see that it's spread worldwide, and I'm happy to see so many hundreds of people involved who are doing these things. It's now their imagination, it's their passion, it's their persistence, it's their courage that is making us what we are.
That's amazing. You must feel, actually, I'm not going to say how you feel. I was going to say it must make you feel proud, but I don't know if that's the right word. How does it feel to see this seed that you created now just blossom into this movement that's beyond you?
I would say the word would be satisfied. I'm satisfied with the way Sea Shepherd has evolved and is constantly evolving. We do not stick to it was only in 2015 that we began seriously to develop these partnerships with government agencies and that, which is working really well. And now they actually teach courses about our operations at the Naval War College in the United States. And we're working with with a lot of people for instance, one of our captains on one of our ships right now is an admiral, the former chief of staff of the Italian Navy. And when he retired, he came to captain one of our vessels. Beautiful.
So lastly, to me, I feel like we're in an all hands on deck moment in time. So last question, what's next in terms of growing Sea Shepherd to make an even bigger impact?
That I have no idea. It will go where it will go. It's in the hands of people all in 42 different countries right now, and hopefully more. It's in the hands of our captains, officers, and crews on the ships, and our directors worldwide. It's no longer in my hands, and I'm just there to to give advice if I can. But where it will go is where it will go. Ultimately, and I said right from the beginning, we're in business to put ourselves out of business. We want a world where we don't have to be there. And so that's ultimately what the objective is. Nice.
So, Captain Paul, I really appreciate your time today. I really feel like I got to learn a lot more about you and the drive behind what you do. We'll make sure to share links to everything that we talked about, all the different causes that you're out there working against. I'll leave you with the final thought.
Well, what I say all the time is for people to understand that if the ocean dies, we die. We don't live on this planet with a dead ocean. That is our ultimate responsibility, is to do everything we can to protect this planet, which gives us life.
Beautiful. Paul, thank you so much. It's been an honor to be with you today. That's our show, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.